Aloha, this is your mean squirrel, here with a quick disclaimer. This podcast contains explicit content and parental discretion is advised. So no bitching if you fucking get offended by anything. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good deal. Did I get lost? What happened? Hello.
And then the bass drop like only a turtle can do.
There we go. All right, I'm not sure what happened. Where'd you guys go?
Ladies and
I'm still
gentlemen,
here.
welcome to
Okay.
the Squirrel Tangent. With me today, actually, I got a couple of special guests. I have two people that actually work in the education field. I have Kanoa, say hi from Hawaii.
That's me. I'm Kanoa. Hi.
And I got Kim, actually a local from Las Vegas. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
And I really, it really got brought up to bring both of y'all in because, Kanoa, you came up with an awesome subject in the quick little conversation I had with you, having to do with the opinions of virtual teaching, how that works
Right.
and how well it works. So maybe explain real quick what you do.
Well, there's all kinds of names for it, right? Distance education is what we call it at UH West Oahu. And the idea there is that, there are so many formats you can have for distance education. You can do a hybrid class where people have to show up at a certain day and time. And you have people, you actually teach in a classroom and people on your island can come and show up for the class and other people can tune in or watch the recording later, that sort of thing. But in general, usually nowadays, distance education is talking about providing completely asynchronous classes, so that just means that, no one has to be there for class time. You don't have to be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 1 to 2. You can access the course materials and all that stuff, anytime during the day or night, and you just have deadlines to complete different assignments and tasks and things like that.
Okay. So it's kind of like learning at your own schedule with a slight, time limit.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm teaching a summer class right now on philosophy of social science, and summer classes are really condensed. So we've got 3 months pressed into 6 weeks.
Oh.
So you can pretty much you don't have to be there at a certain time, but you've got 1 week to read 3 chapters and 4 articles. You've got 1 week to watch 2 films, compose a reflection paper, do a discussion, and complete a quiz. So you don't have to be there at any specific time, but each week you've got deadlines, you've got things you got to do, you got to, and in summer classes, it's much more demanding.
Much more demanding, yeah. And then now, Kim, you have the unique perspective. You're a high school teacher in the juvenile, the juvenile, or what?
Yes. The juvenile detention, we cannot do online learning. They're not allowed to be on the internet because some of our students are forbidden to be on the internet. But my night school is where I was able to, they gave us a weekend notice to jump from regular to virtual learning.
That's got to be rough. I mean, that's like completely flipping a script on you and going, hey, by the way, you're going to be doing this.
Yeah, but it wasn't that bad. It took me a minute to figure it out, but I actually got more out of my students than when we were in class. There was less distractions for them.
Well, Okay, yeah, because are you doing more of the scheduled, like they have to be there at a certain time, or
No,
okay,
no, they were able to complete it when they could.
okay, so they're doing that, and I think that's kind of an essential thing. I would think for as Kanoa calls it, distance learning, because
Yeah,
when
can I ask a question?
yeah, what's that?
I was just wondering, Kim, how you see them having like fewer distractions for the online thing.
They were actually able to concentrate more on the assignment. Um, there wasn't, I did miss the interaction, but we figured out how to do that later on. But there wasn't a million people coming into my classroom asking questions, pulling kids out. They were able to
Right.
complete their
Okay.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
No
There weren't the
discipline
normal.
problems.
Yeah. You don't have
That
to
was
worry
beautiful.
about. Yeah, you don't have to worry about folks like throwing spitballs at each other and that kind of thing.
And that doesn't happen in my classroom, but
Unfortunately, it happens in some of mine.
uh,
Oh wow! You'd think it would change as they get into like graduate level classes, but apparently not.
Well, you would think, but I mean, the basic, you know, uh, boy girl and interaction format and stuff. There's always people trying to get somebody else's attention, and there's love and intrigue anywhere you look. So
Oh, the Game of Thrones in
and
a
nobody had
classroom.
to use the restroom in the middle of class.
right, that's a big one. That's a big help. One of the things I'm finding though is I'm doing like online office hours, and people will come and drop in, but they're not sitting at home. You know, I have one lady. She was out in her garden, and she's doing like she's pulling weeds and stuff. She sets her laptop down so I can see her face and stuff, but she's pulling weeds and I don't know doing what else and that sort of thing. I'm like, you know, I have to repeat everything twice because she's like, what'd you say? So that can be very, very different from the classroom type situation. But it's really nice to have that flexibility. I've had folks communicate with me while they're a passenger in a car, and so it can be difficult keeping track while their video, you're seeing stuff pass by their window and stuff, and you're trying to stay focused. But I do appreciate that incredible flexibility for folks to be able to access the coursework and all the other stuff pretty much on the fly.
It seems like being able like the office hours thing seems like it would almost be less of an inconvenience for the student. Like they don't have to go as far out of their way. They can be like, okay, office hours are now. I can do this in. Okay, we're on. What's up? Yeah.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and that would make education not quite so hard. And I think that's probably one of the things that stops a lot of people is because educating beyond high school is daunting. You're looking at a totally
From a
different
student,
aspect.
I've taken a lot of classes online. I actually refuse to take in-person classes now. I
Mhm.
find the flexibility, it works with my schedule. I can be in my pajamas, drinking my coffee, doing my classwork, and I don't have to commute to anywhere. I don't have to go anywhere. I
Hmm.
can do it all from my house, and it's extremely convenient.
Yeah, not having to leave the
I
house.
think I think as a student, I would I appreciate that too. I had always been much more of an individual type assignment student. I could never stand those group assignments
Oh,
because usually you wound up with somebody who didn't and hold up their end of the bargain or that kind of thing. And I hated the idea that I'm being graded on someone who didn't drink 10 cups of coffee last night and stay up all night and cram and make sure everything's perfect. So I definitely don't miss that. The only thing I would miss about taking a distance class is that that discussion interaction part, because that's hard to do even when you've got like Zoom and you got everybody up there, because even like how we're talking here, I'm waiting. I want to make sure I don't step on anybody's toes, and then the conversation might move forward beyond the point that I was ready to jump in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that seems to me like the one thing that we need to find a way to allow for students to do, because just that comfortable conversation about the topics in the course and stuff can really help, especially those students who are sort of struggling to understand. It helps to set it in a context and give them a place where they can kind of grab a hold of and such, But yeah, I know for me personally, as a student, I prefer the online for, everything that you mentioned, Kim. The only thing that I'd be missing though is that sort of that give and take, and sometimes that give and take is, virtually worthless, and other times it's like the most essential part of the course. And a lot of that also can depend on who else is there and how much effort they're putting into it.
Right. And I would think that, especially in your given field of study, your that social interaction actually would be really important in understanding like the human interaction and stuff.
Well, if one of the big things for our university is that there's a lot of negative connotations about distance learning. There's a lot of folks who say, oh, you're taking correspondence classes, and it's like, no, it's not the same thing. And that interaction is one of the major things that they want to enforce, they want to encourage. And the problem is, though, that we have this format, right? We have,
right.
This distance format doesn't necessarily lend itself to such an easy give and take thing. And I find that for me, when I set up video discussions in the class, they're stilted, they're difficult, it's hard to get the ball rolling and that sort of thing. And I think it's because they feel like, this is part of the class and I'm being, evaluated in some way, shape, or form. Whereas in the office hours, folks are much more comfortable. They're, it's easier for them to drop in for 15 minutes, ask their question, and then take off. So, I don't know. I'd like to find some format to make that work better for sure.
Right.
And that is though, that's the push from the administration, from the university, is they want to be able to demonstrate that the students are interacting with each other and they're interacting with the instructor.
Now, and I'm kind of surprised actually that they're using different, okay, now Skype really dropped the ball on this. I mean, for probably a decade now, we even refer to using other services as, hey, I Skype called them. It's either
right.
Skype or FaceTime. Skype dropped the ball because where are they during this? We hear about what's that one that the Zoom. I mean,
that's a big one we use.
I've used it. I've used it once, and it's cool and all, but because the free version only gives you 45 minutes. But it again, it's like where did the industry leader, FaceTime and Skype, those two, they had the entire system set up and ready to go. Like they've already got conference calling. Yeah, they just like poof, gone. Where,
when COVID hit, our university was only talking about Zoom and this other program called Big Blue Button, and I think we used that through our interface program that we call La Lima. But they didn't even mention Skype. There was no, they didn't care about Skype. It was all about get your Zoom, get your, take your classes and learn how to do Zoom and all that kind of stuff.
And Zoom is actually really simple.
Kim, I was just wondering what sort of technology Kim's using.
Well, at first we were allowed to use Zoom until they had security issues. Then it was banned. So we were using Google Meets.
Okay.
And we were actually doing faculty meetings using that also, which I found interesting.
What'd you think of it?
I didn't use it with my students because it was hard enough just to. A couple of them didn't have the technology and they weren't prepared. I had a kid actually build a computer so he could do his work
Wow.
from scratch. Yeah, because they didn't have the
Well, I give him a
technology.
passing. I give him a pass in the class just for that.
Oh, the kid got an A.
Right?
We'll just put it
Yeah.
that way.
Imagine, right? Yeah.
There was no late anything for that child.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
no, go ahead.
that. Well, I was just thinking, that that's another aspect that we talk about the the technology and all that kind of stuff, but it's still so much of learning is dependent on the learner, right? How motivated they are, how much or how well the material connects with their previous learning and experience and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I've got students who will write a whole page when all they're asked to give is five sentences, and that page will be incredibly eloquent and detailed and logical and that sort of stuff. And then I turn to the next screen and I've got another student with three sentences. And it's just, boy,
Yeah.
it's just such a drastic difference. And boy, if I could just take whatever it is that's motivating that one student and give it to the other folks, and I just don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution for that, but I get the
Yeah,
same thing.
it's intrinsic, right? Yeah, it's intrinsic. I mean, and not to mention too. I mean, like I've got one student who used to do well and not doing as well in the summer class, and then I get contacted and they're having relationship issues and those sorts of things. And okay, well, that makes a lot of sense then. No wonder you're not able to put as much time into your stuff, and it really shows. That this is something that is not that student's number one priority, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
and
that's
I'm seeing though that a lot of times that the education thing and how a student performs isn't necessarily because of their lack of desire to learn. It's because everything else in their life could be preventing them from learning efficiently.
right. Hmm.
I mean, where like
True.
in Kim's position, you got high school kids in a nation where a third of the nation is under the poverty line. So a lot of those kids may not even have the ability to have
Right.
regular access to a computer or a phone to use this technology with. And then,
Absolutely. I mean, for my university, we've got our student population. 40% of our students are in a situation of food insecurity, which means that they don't necessarily know where their meals are going to be coming from. And when I heard that, 40%. Now, of course, um, we're set up at the edge of of the island where really there are a whole this, Greg, right?
mhm.
Y and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Leeward Coast and stuff. This is where the most economically disadvantaged people live. This is the place
Oh
that
yeah.
has some of the worst situations with drugs and violence and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And the ice issue, the ice
But yeah,
problem in Hawaii, yeah, it's all bad.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a huge thing is helping to provide a conducive environment for student learning isn't just about, making sure that your PowerPoints are crisp and clear, right? It's also about making it so that the student can access
Hmm.
the classes and things like that without too great a burden.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's a tough part because there's so many moving pieces there,
yeah.
and then it flows into political and what we want to fund and what we don't want to fund and why we want to fund it and why we don't, and blah blah blah.
And that's what also surprises me though, because for me, the concept of funding education just seems like a no brainer. It just seems like a no-brainer. Like if a better educated American has a better chance at a better paying job, has a better chance of succeeding in life and contributing in a much larger way to the economy. I mean, just flat out, the better education that we can give our this generation, the better we're going to do in the future. But they want to keep on stripping money away from the from education, and that just scares me. Or when they do give them money, it's all going to the wrong place. It's going to admin instead of going to the classrooms.
Right. And then,
That's
I
very
mean,
true.
What was that, Kim?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Kim.
Oh, I was agreeing.
Oh, okay.
And I
Yeah, and then I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. An educated population is is one of the strongest is a strength of a nation, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
Having a population who can discern between information critically is incredibly valuable, right? And that's we're being faced with that right now. And that's why, I mean, education itself is so important. Sometimes I think, it kind of falls in the cracks.
Yeah,
Things
and
like
it
teaching
starts
critical
young.
thinking.
It's not even in the college level. It starts young in my eyes. I mean, you got to teach critical
Yeah,
thinking at a very young age. And
right.
I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of kids don't get that because I don't know. I don't know why. I haven't been able to figure that out why. Maybe it's the restrictions that the teachers are under or how much they can actually spend individual time with the kids or I don't know.
Well, I mean, Kim might know more about this than me, but I do understand that, we've been shifting our, that K through 12 education to sort of be based on national testing, right? And so kind of a focus on, well, they got to get this aspect of science and this aspect of English language. And so it seems to have a more narrow focus rather than that general, learn to think for yourself and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's very true. Very true. We focus too much on testing. I became a teacher so that I could have those teachable moments where we can learn to think for ourselves and we can have a discussion. And they seem to have stripped that away. And some administration, not all, will frown upon you if you stop and talk about something that the kids want to talk about instead of the subject. And I miss that the most. I'm lucky. My principal and my administration, they actually encourage
And I would think
us to
actually
do
in
that.
the juvenile detention department they would because they want that constructive social interaction, and that would
Oh,
be why.
absolutely.
Because
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I have a lot of leeway at the juvenile detention because we'll stop and talk about what's going on, with them, and it's actually encouraged.
That's cool. That's actually really cool, and I honestly think it shouldn't be just juvenile detention that does that, though. I think that should honestly be throughout education, because that makes it so that the students actually feel like, well, somebody gives a damn, maybe, you know,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah, and that sometimes that can make all the difference. Just having that sense that your teacher is engaged and gives a fuck.
yeah,
Um,
somebody gives a fuck,
right.
and
I
I
mean,
got lucky because I went to a that language thing that I'm learning how to do lately. Department of Defense schools, the DODs,
yeah,
and
yeah,
our schools were much smaller sizes because it was basically just the kids on that base. So like my graduating class was I think I had 16 people in my graduating class. My biggest class was like my entire senior year. Like all of the kids that were seniors were in the same class. We were 18 of us or something like that. And
uh,
that was like normal. So the teachers had time to spend a lot of individual time and actually spend time with each student instead of having to go through and be like, okay, well, I've got time for you this week, and I'll talk to you next week, and I'll got, I got a lot of individual time. And,
Yeah.
and I think I got really lucky because of the size of the classrooms and stuff like that. But when I hear,
Yeah, I think that plays a big role. I'm trying to remember. I want to say it's I think Malcolm Gladwell. I think he wrote Outliers, and it has a chapter on class size, and found, I think, an inverse curve, right, where smaller class size is good up to a point, and then it reaches a level of there's just you and two other students or something, and then it's not a class anymore or whatever. But
yeah,
I think he also sort of was able to show that even class size of 20 or 25, depending on how the class is organized, can work just as well as a class of 10.
right, right,
But
and
yeah, again, that's the thing, right? Class size directly correlates to the amount of time an instructor can have with each student.
right, and see now because I hear about like um, Brandy, she graduated from IAEA, and her graduating class was like 1,600 students. It's just like some ridiculous large high school class. I don't know if
Yeah,
it was 1,600. I'm probably way exaggerating it, but it's still like some retarded large class to the point where
yeah,
she did not know everybody in her senior year. It was just impossible to do.
sure.
And
Yeah.
and that's just weird to me. And then Kim, you graduated in Guam, yeah?
Yes.
And see now that was another one. I went to Finnegan Elementary. Um and Dededo middle school. Um, but the classes were small because, well, it's a small island. There just wasn't a lot of kids there. And I think I benefited because it was not that large of a population. Whereas if I'd been in mainland America and gone to a public school off post, then I probably would not have gotten as good an education as I got.
Did you ever want to go to a school off of the base?
Well, see, now I spent so little time in mainland America that
Yeah.
there really wasn't an opportunity. I mean, I may be able to speak a little bit of Spanish, but I am by no means fluent, so I wasn't going to be going to school in Spain or in Panama.
Right. Right.
I don't
Yeah.
speak Icelandic, so I was not going to be going to school in the public schools off post in Iceland. You know, it just
Sure.
wasn't really an option for me. Um,
Your dad couldn't get deployed to like London or something.
right, and then
Yeah.
then I would have been going to the British schools, which that's a completely different kind of education. You
Hey,
know,
they spell a lot of stuff differently. That's for sure.
oh yeah. Besides the fact that it's not the trunk of the car, it's the boot. It just
Right.
a whole different language.
Yeah.
I would have been sneaking off campus to suck on the butt of a fag. But it's had I been in an English speaking country, yeah, absolutely, I probably would have talked to my parents about going to school off post.
Just
Um,
for the difference in experience and
yeah,
that sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But beyond that, I'm glad that I spent so little time as a kid. By the time I was, oh God, I was 9 years old when I moved to Iceland, and we went from Iceland to Guam, which, holy dear God, when I stepped off the plane in
What?
Guam, I thought I'd walked into a microwave because I was, the warmest it got in Iceland was 56 degrees during the 2 years I was there. That was
Right.
that was kind of painful, you know.
Yeah.
But
It's like you step off the plane and you're in a giant rice cooker or something.
oh God, yes.
Yeah.
I remember stepping off the plane onto Guam. Oh, definitely.
Oh man, and the humidity was absolutely atrocious the first time when I first experienced it. I just didn't know what to do with it. But that was the last English, predominantly English speaking, although Pidgin is kind of English. Um, that was the last predominantly English speaking place that we lived. I mean, after that we went to Panama, then Spain, and after Spain I graduated high school there. So,
Right.
I spent the majority of my education career in non-English speaking countries.
Yeah. Right.
But let me tell you, that was some really cool experiences because I've seen some things in person that most people just never get to see in their life. The running of the bulls or a snake crossing the street, the entire street. Um,
Man.
Walking out in us stopping the car to pick a sloth up out of the middle of the street and carry it off to the side of the road so it's not going to get
Right.
hit. The experiences that I had in all these other countries, I wouldn't have given up for $1 million. But
You're not going to get that in Pennsylvania.
no,
The sloth on the road and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
down in Texas, we might get an armadillo, but those are cute little things compared to the freaking rhinoceros armadillos they got down in Panama. And then
Jurassic armadillo.
oh god, those things are like 4 feet long. They're huge.
Yeah.
I mean, damn. And then in Guam, they had the rat snakes that everybody, people used to call me because they would find a rat snake in their house because they would creep in through all the jealousy blinds. And so I was the one that everybody's like, oh, he's not afraid of snakes. And I just walk in and grab the rat snake, walk out the door and set it free in the boonies. But there was like a whole lifetime of experiences that I got to have because my dad was in the military. And not the least of which, though, was probably a better education than most of the kids that went to school in mainland America. And I just, I look at the education these kids get now and like, okay, Kim, you're a math teacher.
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, you're sort of cutting out.
Okay.
Yeah, you're cutting in
Is that
and
a little
out.
better? Is this a little better
yes.
for you? There, okay. But Kim, you're a math teacher, and can you somehow explain to me what this new weird math is that has all these extra weird steps in it?
Okay. All right. It's not that bad. However, the way they implemented it, I have problems with. They threw children into it that were studying the old methods, threw them into it without giving them the proper foundation. It actually teaches kids to think more mathematically. Other countries have been using this, but throwing our kids into this and not preparing them was the problem with Common Core.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's the issue. The kids that have started it, their poor parents are freaking out, but the kids that started it at a young age should be okay with it by the time. And it emphasizes using your prior knowledge to solve a problem.
Okay.
So it is teaching kids to think more mathematically. However, like I said, the implementation with education can be its own worst enemy. And this is an instance where this has happened.
Right. And I gotta imagine the parents, like, if I were to be looking at a kid's math homework right now, I'd be completely lost because they're teaching methods that just don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And now I imagine that.
Yeah, I've seen some videos online, and I'm I'm at a loss. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yes, and it's training kids to think differently and their brain to work a different way. But I think both methods should be taught, not just one. I've always been, I'm the math teacher that says, okay, you guys didn't get it this way? Okay, give me a second. Okay, let's try it this way. Right. Is this better for you? Did I confuse you? And so I don't believe one method is better than the other. I think all methods should be taught.
So it sounds like it's kind of like it doesn't, you throw the ball with whatever hand works best for you, right?
Yes.
Same thing with math. If the method is more intuitive to you, then it's going to work better for you. You should use that method, even if it's not the high and mighty. This is what everybody wants us to use now.
Absolutely. As long as it's a logical way to get the correct answer, then
Right.
I'm all for it. You use any method you want in my classroom.
And
as long as
that
there's
makes
logic
sense.
underneath it, you can explain
Yes.
it, and it's not, well, the tea leaves told me the answer is 6 or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Or the great and powerful Google told me.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And see now, and that makes sense, is to teach both ways to me, because I imagine in 10, 15 years when the kids that started off with this new math, and I call it new math, I know that's not the Common Core or whatever.
Sorry, my cat's interrupting.
That's quite all right. I occasionally get interruptions from cats too. But I imagine the kids that started off young with Common Core, when they have kids, it's just going to be that's how they learned. And as long as their kids are learning in the same method, it's just going to be a simple transition to help them out and
Yes.
to have home involved in education. And I think that's really an important thing, is to have home involved in education, which has gone way, 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 way. Is parents are like, okay, they don't have time to teach their kids at home, and
Yeah.
and I think some of that's really coming to light now with COVID, is parents are suddenly thrust into teaching at home or helping with the education process a lot more, and they don't know how because they just simply haven't been. It's all been on the teachers, and that I had plenty of times where I was doing my homework, or I was doing a book report or a report on the solar system or something like that, and my parents would sit down with me and they wouldn't do the work for me at all, but they would show me ways to look up the information, show me how to think about it, show me how to get my thoughts in a row. And I ended up actually being accused of cheating on a couple of times because I just wrote too well. Yeah,
I've been accused of that myself.
I did a report on the solar system, and my teacher was like, "Well, you're not supposed to do the work for your kid." It's like, I didn't. I handed him an encyclopedia, and I showed him where the articles are. He read them. He wrote the report, and he made the models himself. Don't accuse my kid of cheating. And the thing is, though, is I see a lot of parents these days wouldn't know what to do. I mean, they just kind of like, okay, well, you know where Wikipedia is, and that worries me.
Yeah, I mean, parenting is I think way harder now, than maybe ever before, because there's so many demands and so little support.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where a single income family just doesn't exist. It just
Yeah.
it's
Well, I
virtually
mean,
impossible.
they exist, but they live under the bridge because they're homeless.
Right.
That's the whole thing, and that takes us right back to what you were saying about an educated populace and how important it is.
Yeah.
Because these are the people who go and fulfill government positions and private sector positions, where they're going to have people's lives under their responsibility, and that ability to reason and interact with a bunch of information coming in on a meaningful level, rather than just, well, I do what my boss tells me to do because that's what he tells me to do or whatever. It makes a huge difference. I mean, the ability, for example, for a social worker, to cut people some slack. Okay, so they were late for their appointment or whatever, and that's something we can yank the kids for or whatever, that kind of thing.
Right.
I've always thought that's a big part of this, is that ability to sort of say, yeah, I can yank their kids, or I can, I can put this person back in jail for, because he was 5 minutes late getting back from his work or whatever. But, what's the end result there? It's not just a question of following the rules because, they're all the way that they're all laid out, but also why are the rules laid out that way? And what's our ultimate goal? Do we really want to punish someone, for a mistake that they couldn't control versus, support them for all the things that they're doing right? That's one of the things that I learned working in, at the prison up at Kulani was, there's got to be some sort of flexibility and some sort of give and take. And, people who don't learn to think critically, who don't have that ability to kind of evaluate information and think about it in terms of big picture and different perspectives, they're just going to be button pushers. They're just going to be, they're just going to do what they're told. And that is not what makes a strong nation.
Right. And at some point you got to think about what, oh God, where it's hard to put it more, at what point does a person's effort count? Like, I've
Right.
seen some people that work their ass off and they just don't make a lot of progress. They work hard,
Yeah.
and they don't make a lot of progress because there's just not a lot of support. And when you see somebody that has the drive to work really hard and isn't making it far, how can you help those people to have a more productive life when you know that the potential is there for them to actually do better? And I think that
Yeah.
probably is in the education system too.
I mean, I've had I have one student who did not, could not speak, formal English, right? Dropped out of high school, was raised out in Waianae, and spoke Pidgin all his life, and that was just the way it was, But we have a writing center, we have tutors, we have other folks, so. I'd work with him and he, first he was turning in papers that were written in Pidgin, and I had to say, you're not going to pass this class if you're writing in Pidgin because, the way that we work here is you have to provide formal English and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But, having that, if he had the motivation to use the supports that he could, he had the motivation to come to me and to say, hey, I need help. I'm struggling. I want to do this, but I'm afraid I can't, all that other kind of stuff. And that's that intrinsic part. But, so we have a writing center where he could take his papers, turn them in, and the tutors there would help him translate it into formal English. And by the time he finished, he was actually able to write pretty well in formal English. Now, the speaking, he still struggled because he had to, stop and think and that kind of stuff. And it didn't really matter because it's not like he was going to get a job as a bank CEO or something like that.
Right.
But he was very successful. Did really well afterwards, and that's that kind of flexibility, I think, and that sort of that notion of we got to think outside the box and find the things. Is this person supposed to be held back from graduating because of what they're struggling with? Because when they give their speech for, accepting their diploma, they're going to say, brah, I'm so happy I get this kind, like that.
Right. And it goes, that goes along with the, like I said, Pidgin is kind of English.
Yeah.
And Kim from Guam, they had their own version of Pidgin too.
Yeah.
And it just, I've run into it when I first moved to Guam. There was a few people that they would say something, and I'd have to ask them like 15 times, "What?
Right.
What did you just say?"
And now I have to translate for my students because I'll use some of the island language tomorrow, and they'll look at me and I'm like, "Oh, sorry," and I'll translate for them.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And it's funny because
even the teacher has problems with that.
I live in living in Vegas. There's a large Hawaiian population here. They call it the Ninth Island, and it's funny because just in my workplace alone, there's probably a good dozen people from Hawaii, and when you get all of us in the same room, we start talking and we'll throw in pigeon all over the place, and other people that aren't from Hawaii are looking over like, what the fuck are they talking about? Huh? And you know, we'll stop occasionally and be like, oh, sorry, cuz, you know, and we'll explain what we're talking about. And
Right.
it's funny that I don't even really think of it as a different language, but it really is, you know. And I
It
only
is. It's
speak light pigeon. I'm not even as deep as it gets. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you know, I gained a lot more respect for pigeon when I learned more about it. When I learned that it was actually it's a melange, right? It's a patois of all these different languages that the field workers and stuff, they had to communicate. And you know, we had folks from the Philippines and folks from China and Japan and from Spain and Portugal and all that kind of stuff. And that's really how it developed. And I assume that's how the patois in Guam developed as well.
Kim?
Um, I'm really not sure.
Well,
Would
can you
you,
give us an
Greg?
example?
Well,
What kind of pigeon do they use in Guam? Like, what's your common
well,
statement or that?
there are so many languages on Guam. We kind of borrow from everything.
Yeah,
I would say Chamorro is a little bit more similar to Spanish than it is to English. Would you
yeah.
agree with me, Greg?
Yeah, it is, and it's weird because like half a day is the hello, um, but it or I don't even remember really what the translation is.
And
It,
that's
it,
from like I want to say like Tahiti or something,
Really?
or is that
um,
Chamorro?
that's Chamorro.
Yeah, the
Oh,
Chamorro
okay.
word for hello is
Yeah.
half a day.
Half a day.
Um,
Okay.
biggest difference here, well, cultural problem. When I moved here, I would have my Spanish speakers, and they were calling a kid leche, which on Guam is a bad word. They
Right.
were just calling him milk because he was lighter than they were.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and it's little things like that. This
So
I think tomorrow's more Spanish
so
oriented.
on Guam though, that would carry like a negative connotation, like a racial type connotation.
Oh, not racial. I think leche is shit. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Okay,
remember.
I was just I was wondering if it was similar to the pigeon term haole, which is actually a Hawaiian word, right? But um, the so Caucasian folks in Hawaii are called haoles, and it comes
Same on
from
Guam.
Yeah, I was gonna say
yeah,
actually
yeah. So
In Guam I was called a haole. I was absolutely a
yeah,
haole in Guam. I
Yep.
think that's kind of a
well
Pacific Islander
that's
thing.
yeah, that's the Hawaiian influence there.
Hmm.
And interesting too, because you know that word means no breath, right? Ha is the breath of life, and ole means none.
Hmm.
So when they met with the white settlers, when they met Captain Cook's folks and stuff, they they didn't know the way that they greeted each other, which was to place their foreheads together and breathe in, right? That's the breath of life,
Right.
aloha. And so they said, oh, these people, they don't have any breath. So
Huh.
and from then on, haole was the term for people from other places and that sort of thing. And then it just became haole for Caucasians,
Hmm.
and they came up with all kinds of other slang for every other
Oh yeah.
ethnicity.
One of my favorite stories I've heard is the popolo. For
Yeah.
black people is that was from Samoa. Apparently, the first time they saw a black person who had super dark skin, they said, I guess there's a berry called the popolo berry, which is like almost like,
Oh,
huh? What, Brandy? It, it was Hawaiian. Okay, but the popolo berry is like a super dark, almost purple black,
yeah.
and that's where they said his skin looked like the popolo, and that's where it is.
Yeah, and that's and that's the thing too, right? Like in Hawaii, Caucasians can sometimes get offended by being called Howley. But I don't know about Popolo. I mean, I had one close black friend growing up and stuff, and he had no problem being called Popolo. So, but I don't know. I've heard other folks sort of say like, "Oh, is that like derogatory or whatever?"
And
It can be.
it can be, and I think it's
Yeah, I
about
guess
the
it's the words
tone.
before and after it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Absolutely.
tone. It's the tone of how it's said, and that's the thing
Yeah.
about, because I mean, certain words in the English language that no matter how you say it or when you say it, they're just derogatory. But
Yeah.
and it's not so much so in Hawaiian, where haole is not necessarily a derogatory term. It is just it's basically just a description of a Caucasian person at this point,
Right.
and it's not in any way negative or good. It just is.
Yeah, it just is what it is. It didn't start out being, like a pejorative. It just started out as a descriptor, I guess.
Right. And the same thing with popolo. It's comparing the skin of a person to the popolo berry tree, the super dark
Yeah.
berry. And so it's not, those words are not in any way negative. It's how they're used that can be negative.
Right.
Very true.
And that, I think, is the difference, because the words that we're not allowed to say in the English language, they started off as a negative. I mean, it's literally, the N word is literally a derogatory term for an inferior person.
Right.
Like that is what the definition of the word is, and so there's just no positive way to say that.
Absolutely.
And
then,
that I think is the difference, because if you're describing somebody's race based on just a description, then cool. But if it's based on something that started off with and really only has one definition, then it is what that definition is, and there's just no nice way to say the N word,
Yeah. No. Yeah. Agreed.
And and that's another thing that I think has to, that the education system and everything like that, where kids are exposed to what they see every day on the streets, and the parents and the education system need to work together to see that kids understand that it is a negative. And that's where again, you said being a parent now is harder because there's just so much more, and parents just don't have the time because there's no single income family or anything like that. So the lack of ability for parents to have time to work with the kids at home to continue the education that they get at school is another problem that I think is probably a really bad
Yeah, I
thing here in
think,
America.
somebody was saying the other day that it seems like, our economy is structured to, be pushing us one way, and we're kind of in some ways we're being encouraged to do things that we used to do, like multiple generation households.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the economy is so bad, it's it's much more logical to have to live with your parents for a longer time, right? Your parents can watch your kids while you go to work, and that's one of the things that we see over here a lot more is that whole those multi-generational households, and that idea that we're stronger if we stay together, and that kind of thing. And it seems like that's kind of the way everybody's being pushed. It's like, how can you survive with just, I think it's getting to the point where a couple can't survive on two incomes.
Right. And see, now, because if I mean, it's a little before my time, but if I remember right, the 70s and 80s, it was all about, when they're 18, get the hell out of the house, go be on your own, go do your own thing. And now it's more and more where you're getting, 25, 30 years old, and you're still living at home with your parents. And the bad part is that's still looked at as a negative, even though so many people are just stuck in that situation due to nothing that they could have done themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Yeah, it's
sorry, but
tough.
you
It's a tough
graduate high
call, you know,
school,
because we're.
and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
anymore, a high school education simply isn't enough. You have to have some form of further education. In my case, it was a trade. I learned how to drive a bus,
Yeah.
and you have to have some form of further education in order to have a even remotely close to livable income. And even then, it's not
Right.
guaranteed. I mean, look at EMTs. There's EMTs that are making less than I make hourly, and
Yeah.
these are people that are out there rescuing people and saving lives. That's
Yeah.
just
Absolutely. We
ridiculous.
have a weird pay structure. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And people sit
Yeah.
there
You know,
and
the
mhm.
that's one of the things about military service too is the economy pushes more people into military service. If you want to go to college and you want to be able to graduate from college without $50,000 of debt,
Yeah,
automatically, then the military is a meaningful option, and that all kind of falls back to, well, is this just the way it's turning out by accident, or are we headed towards, as some folks would say, this kind of wage slavery, right? And
right.
the notion that if everyone is in debt and can't pay their bills and that sort of thing, then they're going to be way more dedicated to their jobs. They're going to be way more committed. They'll work longer hours. They'll put other things aside and all that kind of stuff, right? To make sure that they can have the income to pay their bills and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and see now that though leads to such a fine line of balance that it just doesn't make sense because to me at what point do you have hard work and never making any progress, in fact falling deeper and deeper into debt even though you're working hard, and just say, you know what, fuck it, I might as well just be homeless because I'm basically homeless now.
Right.
And
Yeah, that was kind of the decision that your mom and I were faced with. We were struggling. I'm working full time with a master's degree, and she's a ceramic artist, and we couldn't pay rent and pay our bills.
yeah,
You know, and so we had to make a choice. We were either going to be homeless by accident or we were going to be homeless on purpose. And we decided being homeless on purpose made a lot more sense. And luckily it worked out for us. But yeah, we were basically pushed out of our rental home because we just couldn't make ends meet.
yeah, yeah. And that's all too common a story anymore.
Yeah,
It really is all
yeah.
too common a story. But oh hey, look
And
at
that's
that. We've actually been on here for an hour, folks.
all right.
Yeah, we've hit that hour mark. So I do want to thank both of y'all for being on here. It's been educational, to say the least.
I had a really good time. I enjoyed meeting and talking with you, Kim, and thanks a lot, Greg, for the invite. I appreciate the
Hey,
opportunity.
not a problem. And I figure, people deserve to have a voice wherever that voice is, even if it's not heard by a lot of people. At least it could be heard by someone. You
Yeah.
know. And so that being said, I will close it up here, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thank you for listening to the Squirrel Tangent. If you are listening, if you enjoyed it, please tell somebody else about it. That's the easiest way you can help us. You can find us on Facebook. You can also help us out if you really like what you're hearing. You can go to patreon.com/the Squirrel Tangent and throw us a couple bucks, and that helps us actually keep the show going because it is not free. I do pay for this stuff. And I do want to keep on doing it. I want to keep the show getting better. So anything that anybody decides to help with is greatly appreciated. Beyond that, folks, thank you once again for joining us on the Squirrel Tangent. We will be back in another 2 weeks. And Kanoa, Kim, thanks for being on the show. Great having
Thank you.
Thank you.